So you have your generators, you have manifestors, and then you have a hybrid, which are manifesting generators. Then you have projectors and reflectors. So you learn what your type is. Every single type has a strategy to it. So for generators, we respond. As things come into our aura field, we kind of, respond to things. For reflectors, their strategy is to wait a lunar cycle, because if you look at a reflector's chart, they don't have any definition in their chart. So they don't have a fixed and reliable way of dealing with any of the energy that comes into any of their energy centers.
Welcome to the EnvisionAir Podcast. If you're new here, I'm your host, Nicole Ningyuan, and this is your go-to self-development podcast where we envision living our best lives, ones filled with unlimited possibilities, by exploring everyday topics related to health, wealth, community, and love. And if you're not new and you are returning, a very warm welcome, EnvisionAir. I'm so grateful to have you here today to learn, listen, and grow together. This podcast is for information purposes only and should not be considered to be medical, legal, tax, financial, or other professional advice.
This podcast does not encourage or endorse any illegal activity.
We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liability that may arise from the information in this podcast.
The views explored in the podcast may not always be those of the host.
On today's episode, we have a very interesting topic that I'm not sure many of you have actually heard before, but we're going to be talking about human design and how it can be used to elevate your life. Today's guest is Diamond Drip, a speaker whose journey has been featured on KQED Radio News, On Stage Plus Television, New York Weekly, and numerous podcasts. Diamond has a background in business strategy and a passion for personal growth. Her mission is to help individuals break free from fear and self-doubt and step boldly into their power using tools like human design and gene keys, tools she uses to help guide individuals to trust their intuition, embrace authenticity, and unlock their full potential. So I'm very pleased. Diamond, a very warm welcome to the EnvisionAir Podcast. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you to have this conversation. It's just exciting.
Amazing. Yay. Yeah, I'm excited too. Well, human design is a concept that I have kind of heard of in different ways, probably over the last few years, online especially. But let's start with the basics. For those who are not familiar and have not heard about human design, let's talk about what it is and how it can actually help people.
For sure. So human design is a synthesis of a few different ancient and modern sciences. I'll name a few of them. So astronomy, astrology, the Kabbalah tree of life, quantum physics, the Chinese I Ching, and the chakra model. And so what it does is it takes bits of all of these different sciences that tell you different things about yourself. But one of the things that's said about human design is it's the science of differentiation. So whereas your zodiac will give you oh yeah, Tauruses are this or Scorpios are this, and some stuff will fit, but other stuff is I don't really think that's me, because it's a synthesis of a few different sciences. It really is differentiation. So even though it pulls in all these different things, you get a very unique energetic blueprint of your energy, and you can look at it in a very tangible way. You can see where it flows. You can see where you have definition. So where do you put out this energy into the world? And you see where you're undefined. Where do you take in and amplify that energy that's in your environment in you? And one of the most important pieces, I feel as though, is it shows us where we've been conditioned to believe things outside of ourselves, whether that be from our friends, our family, or the biggest one, society, because we didn't have a fixed and reliable way of dealing with the energy that came into that center. So we kind of just deferred to the outside. Oh, people say this. My mom always says this, so I guess I'll believe this. So it shows us those areas where we've maybe held on to beliefs that are not truly ours. And it shows us different ways where we can actually align with what we truly believe authentically.
Wow. Okay. Well, that does seem very powerful indeed. Um, can we go a little bit deeper then into, what it is? Because you mentioned this sort of like blueprint. So, what does it look like from a visual perspective? And then also kind of let's go a little bit deeper into the different components of it all.
Yeah, for sure. So when you first pull your body graph chart, that's what it's called in human design. When you first pull it, it's going to seem like a lot of things all at once. So just to walk you through some of them, there are 9 shapes on the body graph. And so those represent the 9 different energy centers. So you have your crown, the ajna, the throat, the G center, you have your ego, heart center, solar plexus, your sacral, your spleen, and then your root center. So those are the 9 energy centers. Then you'll see like 2 columns of numbers with if you're into astronomy, astrology, they look like the planets. So, like the sun, Earth, Mars, you have all of the planets on the side. And so, um, if you pull your chart on my website, you'll see on the dark blue side, those are all of your personality side traits, all of the things that are activated consciously in you. These are things that you know about yourself. It kind of oozes out of you, and people can kind of sense it about you and your aura. And so that information is imprinted at the time of your birth, which is why whenever you do a human design calculator, it's important that you know as close to the time of birth, if not exactly the time of birth, because that's when you were imprinted with that side of your design. 88 days prior to that date, while you were still in utero, you were imprinted with your design side, which on my calculator is that light blue side. And so that's all like your unconscious traits. These are all things that like we kind of maybe know about ourselves. But it's kind of like the way that we interact with the world. So I'll give you an example. On my personality side, I am a 5. So my aura presents that I have solutions for people. I'm like a challenge solver, save the day kind of thing. Not every projection is correct for me. So that's where your strategy and authority comes in, because it kind of helps you discern like what's correct and what's not. But that's my aura. And then on
Mhm.
my unconscious side, I'm a 1. So I'm an investigator researcher. So whenever information comes into my field, my aura, if you will, like I'm like, okay, let me look that up. Let me fact check
Mm.
this. Let me get to the bottom and really just dive into the essence, especially if it's something that's lighting me up. And so you have like your conscious side and then your unconscious side. So that's what those numbers are. You've got some arrows kind of at the top towards the crown and the ajna. Those represent your variables. So that's like your environment. What environments are you best in? Where do you digest your food best, even? When you look at the bottom, there are different distinctions. So as I said, you have a strategy. So there are 5 energy types. So you have your generators, you have manifestors, and then you have a hybrid, which are manifesting generators. Then you have projectors and reflectors. So you learn what your type is. Every single type has a strategy to it. So for generators, we respond. As things come into our aura field, we kind of, respond to things. For reflectors, their strategy is to wait a lunar cycle, because if you look at a reflector's chart, they don't have any definition in their chart. So they don't have a fixed and reliable way of dealing with any of the energy that comes into any of their energy centers. So it's up to them to wait out the lunar cycle so they can see the patterns. They can, use the 29-day consistency of the lunar cycle to make these major decisions in their lives, because that's really what your strategy and authority is used for. Like friendships, family, if you're about to move, and then career. That's the biggest one. So you have your strategy, and then as I said, authority. So there are 7 different authorities. About half the population has emotional authority. So we have to kind of like ride out our wave and like come to our truth over time, similar to reflectors, but it can be a lot quicker than reflectors. We don't have to wait 29 days.
Mhm.
You also have your profile, which I kind of went over a little bit.
Wow. Okay. So there's so much information there. But essentially, if I was going to summarize what I've heard, it's the human design body graph is a map of your energetic body, but also maybe some of the limitations, but also are real strengths that we can utilize once we become conscious of them. And it's really detailed, and presumably you need assistance or some sort of explanation when you're actually trying to cipher through this map. But I have used your tool, and we've gone through mine, which was really interesting. And it was really fascinating to see all the different sort of activated areas in my body based on different chakras that are, more open or activated than others. So really, really fascinating. You talked about 5 different energy types. So let's go through each one. And can you just give a little bit of a short summary of what it is and maybe the strengths and weaknesses of both?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start with manifestors because for a time the world was really made up of manifestors and generators. So manifestors, I like to think back to like the time of the pyramids. So generators and manifesting generators, we have our sacral defined. So we're like the energizer bunnies. We can like go, 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 like all day long. As long as we're doing work that we love, like we can just keep up with that rhythm. The other 3 are technically called non-energy types because they don't have that sacral definition. So manifestors, back in the day, you can think of them as like the pharaohs and things. Like they had these ideas to build these pyramids, but like they didn't have the energy to sustain that. So they had the generators, work and fulfill like the vision. Like the manifestors would have the vision, they just didn't have the energy to sustain it. And so one of the benefits of being a manifester is that they are the only energy type that doesn't really have an element of waiting to their strategy. So they can have like a download and they can just be like, "Oh, I'm going to do this. Like I'm going to just go. I'm going to bring this idea to life." I always like when I talk to people who have different energies, I'm like, "How do you experience that?" And so one of way back when I don't meet many manifestors, and when I do, like their aura is like a repelling aura. So I always kind of know when I'm in the presence of a manifester because I'm like, why don't I feel the bubbly warmness that I normally feel around people? Like 70% of the population falls into either manifesting generator or generator. So manifestors, they can just go into action. And so like because they can just leap into action, if they don't tell people around them who's going to be affected by their decision to leap into action, what'll happen is they'll be doing all the things, they're flowing, they're doing whatever, and then someone will be like, "Hey, what are you over there doing?" And then like they got to stop, they got to slow down, they got to tell whoever it is, like, "I'm doing these things." And by the time they explain what it is that they're doing, what they're trying to bring to life, what their vision is, they're knocked off, they're knocked out of the rhythm. And it's like, and it can be so hard for them to like get that momentum going again because it was like
Interesting.
I was in the flow, I was doing the things. So generators, like I said, we have this because you're a manifesting generator and I'm a generator. So I can say we, and like I said, we're 70% of the population. We are out here like doing
Right.
the thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
generators, our strategy is to respond. So what happened is like we would kind of, again using the pharaoh example, like we would have these ideas, we would have these wants, we would have these like desires to bring things to life, but whenever we would try and initiate things, like we would burn ourselves out because not every idea that we have, like we know this as humans now, like not every idea that you have is meant to like have action taken on it, which is why the universe will bring us things to respond to engage our sacral response. Generators, our strategy is to respond. So things will come, it'll engage our sacral response. And when we're doing work that we love, we feel our signature theme of satisfaction. Manifesting generators, they are like a hybrid of energy. So typically, generators, we have our sacral defined and we might have a defined throat, but a lot of us don't, from just based on the charts that I have pulled and people have pulled on my website. A lot of generators don't, like we may have definitions activated in our throat, but we don't have it like defined. And so manifesting generators, they kind of have like almost the best of both worlds. Like they still have to respond to things. Otherwise, they're going to like burn themselves out. If you, depending on who you study with, they manifest quicker because they have these downloads. They have what's called a throat to motor center activation. So for manifesting generators, they have a throat connection to one of the motor centers. So a lot of the manifesting generators that I've met, they either have like throat to spleen. So like they have a lot of downloads around like survival and like overcoming fears, things like that. Or they'll have like a throat to solar plexus. So anyway, they can manifest quicker because they have this throat connection, if you will. So if they have a throat connected to one of the motor centers, they can move into action quickly. And so for manifesting generators, it's actually a line for them to do more than one thing because they can move into manifestation so quickly. They're able to have the gift of efficiency. So obviously we know that multitasking like isn't really a thing because you can only focus on one thing at a time, but they can be really great at like a lot of things versus like generators, it's a line for us to have that one love, that one thing that sparks, things in us. Like, yes, we'll have different interests. Yes, we'll have hobbies. We'll have, whatever. But for them, you might meet a manifesting generator who is an anesthesiologist and they love it. They might be a life coach and they love it. And they might have like one other thing that they're doing that they love. And so I always give the example of generators versus manifesting generators. Generators, we have like a process about things. So like we'll be like, okay, I want to get from here to here. And so in order to do that, I need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like all the way up until 10. The manifesting generators will come in and they'll look at that list and they'll be like, that's cool that that's how you did it, but I don't think 3 is really necessary. 4 or 5 could probably, those are like suggested options, but they weren't really like crucial to the element of bringing this to life. So they have that kind of gift of efficiency. Then you have projectors, which, as I said, are a non-energy type. So they oftentimes are the example that I use for, because they're like, I think they're like something like 20% of the population. And so they are meant to, in this new awakening of conscious that we're approaching, they're meant to really be our guides. And so their strategy is to wait for the invitation, because if they don't, they experience the not self theme of bitterness. So as I just said, they're our guides. So when they are invited in to be like, yeah, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and we're really excited about blah, blah, blah. What do you think about it? Then it's aligned for them to be like, yeah, I think you should make these tweaks. Reflectors, like I said earlier, they are the rarest energy type. They are less than 1% of the population. And so they are kind of like in this example of like, the manifestors have the ideas, the generators help them, bring it to life. The projectors are like, okay, this is how you can use your energy more efficiently. Like, don't build your blocks this way, build them this way. The reflectors in this example, they kind of are like observing everything, taking it all in. That's why for reflectors, especially with all of that openness in their chart, it's really important for them to be in the right environments because they take in so much energy. They're the people they're around, the places that they are, like it needs to be something that feels good to them because like we said, like if you have definition, like there's kind of this energetic buffer. You put energy out into the world. But if you don't have definition, if you pull your chart and there are white areas and all of their charts, like all of their energy centers are white, they take in and amplify the energy. So for them, that's why they rely on the lunar cycle as their strategy, because even though they take in and amplify energy, like they at least can be like, okay, let me wait these 29 days. Let me come to my truth over time. Let me talk to my friends. Let me change my environment. Let me go here. Let me do this. Let me do these things. And then throughout that like month, they'll have like yeah, I felt this way for like 4 weeks. I think this is the direction to go. Like, I think this is where we're going to go.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow, fascinating. I love this. I mean, it is so detailed. And again, you have so much knowledge about these energy, I guess, say, I don't know how you describe them, but like different energy types
Yeah.
that make up human design. And so if you were going to, like, I always love a good practical example. So for each five of the energy types, can you share like a well-known celebrity or someone who exemplifies that we would all kind of know?
Yeah.
Because even when you were talking, immediately I started thinking about different people in a public context that probably would fit this. So, but I'm going to let you go ahead.
Yeah. So I have a couple of examples for a few like one or two of the energy types. Simone Biles, I just learned, is a manifesting generator, and
Oh, wow.
Rihanna is a manifesting generator. I believe Paris Jackson, which is Michael Jackson's daughter, I believe she was a generator. Her dad, Michael Jackson, was a projector. Taylor Swift is a projector, and
Wow.
Sandra Bullock is a reflector.
Wow. Fascinating. That's really interesting. A lot of information. Let's say we have listeners who actually want to implement this in their lives. How do they actually start to understand their human design body chart, and where do they even start? And also, do you have resources that people can start actually looking into to learn more about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have resources, of course. So I'll talk about those, and then I have my mentors that also have some very good resources. So if someone really wants to start, practically, well, one, pulling their chart, they can do that on my website, diamonddripconsulting.com. Scroll down a little bit further past those little brief descriptions. There is a free 7-page ebook that they can download, and it's based on their chart specifically. So it'll give them some tips for things they can do to sleep better. It will give them tips on how to manage stress and pressure more effectively. So dealing with the root center. It also will tell them how their immune system is designed, which is really helpful. So the ebook is called Improve Your Health by Design. And then, of course, if they want to do an even deeper dive and maybe look at some of their gates and some of their, most important gifts, there is a 60-page report that they can buy right underneath there. And so I think that those would be really crucial places to start and just kind of like start, getting a little taste of like what your energy is and how they can start using it more efficiently. One of my mentors who I've worked with, her name is Candy Barone. Her angle is more from like the corporate space. So like, how can you really start using this in teams? How can you understand the energy types of the people that you're leading so that you can, basically bring out the strengths of your team and not having people burn out and things like that. So I love Candy so much. Like, she just, no words to describe how much she has even helped me in my business. Um,
Fantastic.
and one of her mentors, her name is Karen Curry Parker, and she does a lot with quantum human design, traditional human design. Ra Uru, who is the founder, he is no longer with us, and he had the initial download like back in the 80s, and so that is where a lot of the language generators, manifestors, kind of came from. Karen Curry Parker, I believe she studied under Ra before he passed away, and she looks at things from a more quantum perspective. And so her, even the terminology of like how she distinguishes, like, generators are alchemists in quantum human design. So it kind of gives you a little bit more of a essence or empowerment around some of the different terminologies. So I haven't personally done a lot of deep work into Karen Curry's items, but I know Candy has, and I love everything about Candy. So,
Well, we'll definitely put all of those links into the show notes so that we have that for people to go to, as well as, of course, your website where people can get their graph, their body graph. And so, before we move on to the final segment, if you were leaving listeners with, some of the benefits that,
yeah.
really why human design it can really elevate their lives, explain to us how it really can make a huge impact in elevating one's life.
Yeah. So, 100%. One of the things that I like to say about human design is that when you pull your chart, when you start diving into like the gates, when you start diving into like even your variables, the environment and things like that, like it's not something that you don't already know necessarily. Like for me, I have a buzzing appetite. Even when I eat food at home, like I'm typically watching something. Like for me to just sit there and just like focus on the food, like I don't know, that would bore me. And so like it's aligned for me to have things going on while I'm eating, having conversation with people, things like that. And so to further that in a bigger way, when you start learning about your design, things that you maybe knew about yourself, but you didn't have like the language around like, oh, this is what's going on, it then validates or confirms things that you thought, but because of conditioning, because of the way that you grew up, like from the time that we're born, we're in our parents' energetic aura field. And so whatever shadows they're living in, whatever trauma they've gone through, whatever beliefs that they have, they instill in us, which are not always things that we naturally believe, but we will ourselves into believing these things because it's like, mom always says this, dad always says this. Or, you know, when we grow up and we start becoming teenagers and we're around our social groups more, you know, like boys are gross, like things like that. So we start believing what our friends believe. And then the biggest one is society, especially like, I mean, I know you're in the UK, but like in the US especially, like we live in a capitalist society where money equals safety. Like the more you earn, the more successful you are. And so you start willing yourself into these things because you think that's what you should do or what you have to do in order to survive on this material plane. And so when you learn who you are at soul level, like your essence, and you're able to have things confirmed and validated in you that like society has maybe made you wrong for, you're able to have like more confidence in who you are. You're ready to step into your authenticity like full heartedly. You're like, this is the way I was designed. Like you tried to make me wrong for this, but, and I'll give a perfect example. Like when I was 14, I was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder. And so, like, even the name is like, you know, bipolar 2 disorder, there's something wrong with you. Or even if you think about like ADHD, they call those people neurodivergent. Okay, divergent away from what? What is normal at that point? And so it kind of makes you feel wrong. But when you step into human design, I have emotional authority. Like even in the name is more empowering because it's like, no, there's no truth in the now. Like I do have emotional waves. I do have to ride things out. I have to see how I'm feeling in a high. I have to see how I'm feeling in a low. And if I'm still saying yes to this, whether I'm in a high or a low, then it's a yes for me. It's a line for me. And so that kind of empowerment can go a really long way in terms of your confidence in the way you show up in the world.
Oh, I love that. That was so beautifully put. And I love how empowering human design is for people because you've really summarized that very well. Like this idea that our soul there's more meaning to why we are here. And therefore, human design is helping us to maybe discover some of those elements, which is very beautiful and really empowering. So, thanks, Diamond, for sharing all of that. I think that that really is going to pique a lot of interests in a lot of listeners to learn about human design. And I really, really enjoyed learning about mine when we did our deep dive into my into my body graph as well. So thank you for that. Right. Well, we're on to the final segment of the podcast, and this is the EnvisionAir questionnaire. And this is a fun feature where we ask guests to reflect on their past, on as well as their present, and also look towards their future. So I'm going to ask you three questions. The first one being, what is one piece of advice you would have given your younger self or you would give your younger self?
I'm still working on the advice that I would give the younger part of me that gets triggered all the time by my 7-year-old. But I have been doing a lot of work lately with my teenage self. And the one thing that I would tell her, especially like I was removed from my mom when I was 15 due to child abuse and neglect. But prior to that, my whole life had been controlled by my mom. So I would have opportunities and they would be taken away from me, or I would be, especially my mom was non-emotional. She didn't have a defined solar plexus, and I did. So I would be coerced, or I would be forced into thinking that my emotions weren't valid. Like, why do you feel that way? Like, you shouldn't feel that way. And there was just this element of control, so much so that even when I was removed from her care, like that carried over. And I recently learned how it has been affecting me in business. Like, I have this fear of success sometimes because I'm like, if I really step into my light, if I really start making this like a thing, like, is it going to be taken away from me? Like, is the rug going to be snatched out from me somehow? And so what I would tell my younger self is like, I know it's hard. I know that it feels like there is no way out, but it does get better. You will overcome this. Like, you're way more resilient than you think you are.
I love that. That's such good advice. Um, and looking towards your present, if you could have dinner with anyone in the world tonight, who would it be and what would you ask them?
So if I could have dinner with anyone in the world tonight, I don't know why the first person that came to me was Barack, but after like that reactive, I would say Oprah, honestly. Oprah's a generator, by the way. So Oprah, I always get this comforting like statement from one of my mentors. She's like, because I have a completely open throat, so I have no definition. So a lot of times I will get caught up in thinking about like the right thing to say because like I don't have a consistent voice. Like sometimes I don't know what I'm gonna say, but like it works because my voice can shift and mold and meet people where they are. And so I'm always told by one of my mentors, Crystal, she's like, Oprah has an open throat. That's why she's able to like connect with so many different audiences. And I just want to pick her brain about like her open throat because like, please teach me your ways. I know that like it was not always this easy for you to talk and to speak your truth and to be this confident. So please tell
Yeah,
me the ways.
love that. Amazing. I feel like Oprah has definitely been on the top of many people's former guests lists. She's definitely a favorite on this on
Yeah.
this podcast, and I definitely agree with you. That'd be such a good guest, a good dinner guest. Okay, what's one goal that you would like to achieve in the next 5 years?
Yeah. So the goal that I would like to achieve in the next 5 years is actually to start stepping into retreat spaces.
Mm.
One of the things that came to me when I switched into, well, actually it came to me after my psilocybin clinical trial experience back in 2022. I was like, I would love to like host retreats where people like are able to come and have these plant experiences. But now that I've, been riding my emotional wave and being out there with human design, I'm starting to understand that like it's that generator thing. I always thought that I had to do it. I had to
Mhm.
host it. I had to initiate it. And one of the things through networking that I'm discovering is that like I actually like if someone is having a retreat, if someone is having a plant medicine retreat, if someone is having, some sort of rediscovery, like a yoga or something, whatever it is that gets people out of their everyday and immerses them into an experience where they get to awaken to whatever part of themselves is lying dormant, what I do only enhances that. And so, either opening or closing it, whatever, and having people really start to understand who they are, like at this soul level,
Yeah.
is so profound and helpful. And they can take practical tips and strategies with them once they leave the retreat and start experimenting with their authority. So, like, my dream
Mm.
over the next 5 years is to really make some strategic partnerships where I can partner with people who are already doing amazing things and that this would just enhance that.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, well, we're going to be watching this space as you develop it. And that's a very awesome and exciting, very exciting. I love retreats. So you'll have to let us know when you
Yes.
set that up.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Diamond, for being on the EnvisionAir podcast and sharing so much about human design. I've learned so much about it, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. Now, before we wrap up, can you tell listeners where they can find you?
For sure. So the main place is going to be my website, diamonddripconsulting.com. I am on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of the things.
Well, thank you again, Diamond, for being on the EnvisionAir podcast. And to the listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys staying around and listening and being committed to learning and growing. And just remember to stay curious, stay open, and keep envisioning those unlimited possibilities in your lives. Lots of love. Thanks, everyone, for listening to the EnvisionAir podcast. Make sure that you like and subscribe to this podcast so that you stay up to date on all of our new episodes.